An apple a day keeps the doctor away, but a glass of OJ keeps the adversary at bay. Here's Oddjob.
Hey, it's time for a glass of OJ. Oddjob, and this is...
Hey there, I'm AccidentalCISO.
All right, so we basically just went to BlueTeamCon. We're actually still here in lovely Chicago, Illinois. And we decided to actually get together and share some of our notes, compare notes about what we just saw at BlueTeamCon. Yeah. The con, I think, as far as hacker cons go, because it's still in that hacker con flavor, the only con I know of that is really dedicated to the Blue Team defense side of security.
Yep, exactly. Frank was very passionate about that and wanted to start something specific for Blue Team and defenders, and the sort of the overarching philosophy though that I liked that they talk about at the beginning though was very inclusive, that the Blue Team is, I think the word they used was the culmination of everybody who is working to protect an organization. So even the red teamers that are employed by the organization, who ultimately are working there to protect the organization, are still, Blue Team in a way as well.
That was funny because one of the talks I did go to was actually releasing malware. And the purpose of it was, hey, here's some ransomware. I think it was called Iron Cat. Here's some ransomware that you can run in your own company and use it to determine whether your detections are working or not, and what types of detections you have, and if they're stopping what a lot of ransomware techniques are using, and you can use modules to change the behavior of this ransomware, so you can do iterative testing and modify the plan depending on what evasion techniques you may be. So I thought that was very interesting, and I'm thinking even about using it in my own environments too.
Very cool. I've done similar things before, helping clients through that sort of thing, sort of doing purple team exercises and stuff, not with that specific tool, but I mean, it's a very powerful way to look at testing in your org, because you're testing the technical side of it, but you can also test your tooling and your processes and your people all together when you do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's exactly what I brought in too. What was the talk you went to? So we probably attended quite a few talks. I think I did 5. I know you attended several talks.
I attended several. Where to start?
Right.
I think one of the ones I really enjoyed was the talk about OT versus IT, operational technology versus information technology, and sort of the collaboration that has to happen there, and that to successfully, start having your IT team or your SOC team start taking ownership of monitoring of operational technology items. Those things being HVAC systems, refrigeration controls, door controls, all of those things that help control things in the real world in our environment, that they're not just IT things, but now they're ever more becoming networked. When you have the monitoring and stuff being implemented, that collaboration there, you've got to set expectations and boundaries between the teams in order to make that successful, so that it's understood what the roles and responsibilities are there between those two groups. So I really, really liked that talk, because that's how you keep IT from feeling like things are just being dumped on them, for instance. And that's how you feel, or how you keep the people that are in charge of the OT systems from feeling like things are being taken away from them in the process, and that it's a team thing.
They still want their ownership of their area,
a common good, and that sort of thing. So I felt like those were really, really interesting. Also, the looking at using frameworks and things for baselining activity of these OT things, and the OT administrators, the people responsible for those, working with IT to help them baseline what does normal
Yes.
look like for these things.
Because there really shouldn't be a lot changing in that environment all the time, whereas this is very managed.
Yes.
At a quality level.
Yeah. So that was a big thing there that I also liked. That was a really, really good talk. But the roles and responsibilities and the communication and expectations, I mean, those things are so important in any project, anytime you have cross-functional collaboration between teams. So I think that's what I appreciated most with that talk.
That becomes interesting because there's such a language difference between IT and OT.
Good point.
Even what OT would call a project is different than what IT would call a project. You know, IT making changes to certain configurations or functionality, that's a project. But in manufacturing, for instance, a project is bringing a product up online. That's a project. And if you talk about, you know, making network configuration changes, they're like, that's not a project. You know, that's not something that affects our revenue, or that's not, you know, part of the product delivery or whatever. So that's an interesting thing to kind of mind that gap between the language too, as you're planning that out with them. But getting those roles out is super important. Yep.
And I think one of the other things they talked about, and this was kind of a recurring theme of the conference, and we'll obviously end up talking about this more because it's a recurring theme. Actionable metrics was another thing that the OT folks and the IT folks, when you're looking at moving the security monitoring and also the operational monitoring of some of these things into a common team that's doing that, having actionable metrics is really important, so that when something happens, detection, something's wrong, whatever, like you know what normal is, and people know what they're supposed to do in the process as well, and that those metrics would be able to help with that.
Yeah, no, I mean, knowing when the light has turned red and then what that means and what you got to go do is important.
Yep. Man, what other talks did we have? We had
basically kind of like the board whisperer talk. It was hacking the board?
Yes, Alyssa Miller's talk about that. That was really some next level stuff.
Yes. She kind of led off with a bit of like some myths that we kind of tell ourselves, didn't she? It was like never let a good crisis go to waste, which is kind of a negative. Like, oh yeah, you know, this just happened, and so now I need to bring you doom and gloom. When really, when a crisis happens, you also need to consider, you know, where were we successful? Where has our investments actually helped us?
Yep.
You know, what is actually working there? Security as a risk management function. That's a part of it, but that's not all, and that plays into some of the kind of the good, better, best that she went into later.
Yep. That there's tactical things that are part of security that aren't directly risk management in there, and that if we think of security as only being about risk management, we pigeonhole ourselves into a smaller sliver of what the field really is.
Exactly. The language of risk business is risk, and no, it's profit.
Money.
Because that's what the shareholders are interested in too, right? And then the board needs metrics, and that kind of, you know, that's kind of going everywhere there. But you know, but metrics are just a part to a story. And how you get to tell that story. So, but then she kind of went in after she did those myths. She started talking about, you know, recon. You know, doing recon on the board, right? So we started going through an attack methodology.
Use your hacker skills.
Exactly. Use our hacker. And she talked about assessing the perimeter, so get to know the board. And so that was great
what's their
insight.
background? You know, what are they interested in? You know, what are they going to be worried about? How are they going to think? Like using the information that's available to you, to start understanding them and to be able to anticipate the questions that they're going to ask and those types of things.
Do your OSINT work. Do they sit on nonprofits? What other boards do they sit on? Are they in other industries, you know?
And not only to just be able to tailor the information you might share with them.
Right.
But she was talking about how you can use that information to connect with them on a personal level.
Yes.
Because those, you need to build that relationship as well.
Right.
To start building trust, not just be there to present for 10 minutes and then out
So
the
go
door.
stalk their Facebook page and ask them how their kid's doing.
That's right.
I don't think she meant to go that far.
That's not creepy at all. No.
Yeah, maybe hang off that part of it, OSIT, but get to know them, ask them those questions, keep up with their hobbies, but by keeping up with them personally.
Yeah, that was pretty good.
It was. She did a pyramid of pain thing as well, which was always fun to have one of those. But I think
the thing that I loved the most, in that, and this was when she did the good, better, best.
Oh yes, the good, better, best was the best.
She led with good. Obviously, and she says, good is where you are helping the organization cut costs. Mm-hmm. And improve efficiency.
Yeah.
Getting away from being a cost center to helping to enable the business through efficiency. And I tell you, I sat there and I was like, oh wait, man, she's starting with that, because that's something that a lot of orgs that's kind of seen as man, if we could just get there, we'd be doing really well. And that was just the good.
Yeah.
And then so at that point, I'm sitting, leaning forward in my chair, man, I'm going to learn something here. What's she going to say next? And, so the better then on this was to help them tackle things on their wish list. Things in the organization that they've wanted to do, that security can help enable the business through enabling them to achieve goals.
Yeah.
That sort of thing. Okay, that's good. Now we're more efficient and we're helping them achieve different goals. And I wasn't sure where she was going to go with the best. And, this was that mind blown kind of thing like you see in the meme.
Yeah.
With, I can't remember the guy's name from the wrestling.
Yeah.
And it goes through the frames, and by the end, the beams are shooting out of his eyes and everything. And the best level on this that she gives us was helping the business establish new lines of revenue.
Right.
Whoa, to think that security is going to take on an enablement role there in doing security work that's going to enable them to bring on new lines of business, new revenue streams for the organization.
And when I listened to that one, I was kind of fuzzy on even okay, but what does that look like? And I think she gave an example of extending, the same controls you use for some of your federated identity to the customer, and now that's a core feature of your product with them, which in some contexts I guess would work. The other thing I was thinking even was, maybe it's not so much about, security itself becomes kind of this product that gets revenue, but more so of security stops kind of treating the business as a separate entity that's making profit, and we're there advising them to do it better. Instead, we're going great, we're gonna deliver product X. I want to deliver product X, and I want to be there for the ride, and I want to deliver that with you.
Exactly.
Yeah, and so it's how do I help? What do I do to get in there? That's, I think, how security stops being the afterthought of, oh, now we need a firewall rule, or, oh, are we meeting your requirements and policy? It now starts turning into, oh, wow, the security's helping us to deliver this, and make sure we're going to be successful in doing so. And I think that's where you start turning the conversation from security being a cost center into that profit enablement of that's where you really get the value out of that investment.
Yep. And it can come in sort of the form of that digital transformation. And it will obviously depend on the business. And an example that I think of is, some folks that I know are executives in a company in the aviation industry that does maintenance plans that help corporations manage the costs of maintaining their corporate aircraft
Right.
for large organizations. Because that can be very expensive and it can be somewhat unpredictable. And so their entire purpose is to help them manage that cost. And this company's been around for a very long time. And so they have years and years and years of data about aircraft maintenance costs and stuff, like kind of with, based on everything that they've seen over the last 30 years or however long they've been around. And they had done an acquisition of a piece of software that was an on-prem piece of software for managing the warehouse, the parts and that kind of stuff that are used for maintaining aircraft. And they wanted to look at replatforming that and turn that into a SaaS model and build a SaaS like aircraft maintenance parts ordering like system that they could sell. Like this was now an entirely new digital business arm of a company that historically was not a digital company in the aviation industry, but now they're creating this whole new digital arm of the company. And like that's one of those opportunities where security can play a role, because you have this data that obviously has to be protected and secured in ways that are appropriate for different classifications of data, different types of systems, all of that stuff. I mean, all of the operational side of protecting that new SaaS thing. Like, there's a lot that goes into the planning and executing of this. And for a CISO and a CIO and a CTO to be able to collaborate on those things, to do this and do it safely and correctly, and do it in a way that they're not bolting security on as an afterthought, having to make a bunch of changes and rework. They get it in from the very beginning. That's a fantastic example, I think, to me, of one of these things where security now is being an enabler for the business to help drive standing up new opportunities for revenue in the company.
Right. And and this is the case where so many businesses are finding themselves now. They're no longer really kind of in that frame where they're like, oh, we're an aviation company, or we're a defense company, or we're pharmaceutical. Now they're really having to consider themselves, we're a technology company. And embrace that technology is at the core of not just the delivery of their business, but that's literally the innovator of their business and what builds the products that the customers use and get their hands on. And I think we can kind of take it to that next step where we say this company is also a security company. Some of it's a little easier when you're like in a bank or something, because that's classical security of keeping your money safe, keeping keeping investments safe and things like that. So there's all of that where security kind of is the product, if you will. But I'm thinking of also just kind of when I go to developers, and they start saying, well, this is a non-functional requirement, these security requirements you have. And I kind of look at that in the converse and I say, okay, so is it a feature of your product that it leaks data? Well, no. I'm like, do we need to go to marketing and say, hey, you should really be talking about this great feature we have? It leaks data. No, that's not what we market. Okay, then why don't we make sure the thing doesn't leak data? Because I'm sure the customer, when they're buying your product and you in investing their money in your technology, they have underlying assumptions that it's going to be secure, that it's going to...
That's table stakes.
That's table stakes. Where I'm putting my data, you're keeping it safe. You're maintaining the integrity of that data. I can rely on the data I put up there. And so like that should be about the core, some of the core functionality that we're delivering to our customers is that. So to me, it's like that's where I think we get into the conversation of driving profit forward, because we're assuring that part for the customer. And, I think we need to even get so far to where security is not something we take seriously only when we get breached, and then we have to write that in our cover our ass letters out to the public. But it now becomes something that people invest in so much that they're comfortable saying it in marketing. We take your security seriously. That's why we're taking these precautions. Your data is safe in our area.
Yep. Yeah, excellent point. Another man, there were so many great talks. Carl had one on transformational leadership.
Yes.
That was really good, talking about how leadership historically has philosophies or whatever methods with it has been very transactional.
Yes.
You know, if you do this, I'll do that sort of thing, and just moving to a more transformational leadership model where you're more focused on developing the people and that sort of thing, that it creates a much better environment to help your people develop and grow, keep them engaged, and just generally make it a much better work environment. And was really interesting hearing him talk about that in the nonprofit that he's working in.
Yeah, and I mean, you think about, again, you can use the same tricks with the board with that too, which is get to really know your stakeholders, your partners, get to understand how they see their business, how they see what they're trying to do, what goals do they have, and that's how you really turn it from being transactional to, hey, you know, how do I become a part of this too? You know, not treating you know, the business as this third-party monolith over there that's kind of at arm's distance, and more like we're all part of the same, really all part of the same business.
Yep.
Yeah.
That was an excellent one. There was a lot of great stuff in the unconference thing as well. A format that I love where, you know, folks can just sign up for things that they want to talk about. It can be pretty much anything. It's a little more informal. You know, things aren't going to be quite as
I saw a topic
polished.
on calligraphy.
They had somebody do a talk on calligraphy. One that I saw was Kevin Jackson talking about some stuff that he's been doing more academically, and he's working on building a tool to do this, but right now he's still in the very early stages, but using data and analytics and AI to be able to make strategy decisions.
Wow.
Because a lot of what we've used in security up to this point is using AI to make tactical decisions, to weed out false positives and kind of quiet the noise so that your people can focus on what's really important. But where he's looking at is how do we use AI to help us make and analytics to make business decisions. And if you can, have a large enough data set on the activities that are done and the tools that are done and like the controls that are implemented and things like that in different orgs, that you could get to a point where you can also, if you also have data on what were the outcomes for those, and then you can look at using AI and that kind of stuff, you can start making connections between, if you have these controls in place, you can expect these kinds of outcomes and start to model, well, if we don't do this, but we do this instead, like what sort of outcomes would you still get? And by using, kind of analytics and probably I'm going to guess probably some actuarial techniques and that kind of stuff, can start actually putting some numbers and dollars, as we were talking about. The board's language is dollars. It's not risk so much. Like risk gets communicated in dollars to the board of expected potential losses, savings, whatever. If we implement MFA, we're going to expect to save this much. Like being able to look and play with those types of things, like that sounds really cool to me, to be able to take the data and all of the analytics and put it into a system to make strategy decisions. Really, really neat. And now getting that data, I think, is going to be the hard part in that. So like,
because where do you gather that data from? Because it's like there's various processes you can gather there. And what's the quality of data you can expect out of that too? I think that's interesting, because if you can get good quality, stable, clean data from different parts of your processes that result in a consequence or an outcome, think it'd be interesting to teach an AI what different parts of processes affect the outcome in what ways, to where then the AI is essentially modeling potential process changes. And I think that's kind of what it's getting into, is it's going and changing the different parts of the process to see what the outcomes are, to say, could you have had a better outcome? Could you do that? So that's interesting. The thing with AI is you do have to train it. And that's always the thing. And that's a lot of data. And you're trying to almost help the AI kind of understand the why of it too.
Yes.
And that's the challenge. So I'm no surprise he hasn't gotten yet. It's very still academic, but that sounds really interesting.
Yes. Yeah. And you mentioned the why.
Yeah.
The why, and back to metrics, or that recurring theme that I was saying we were going to have, like the why was a big piece of what Jake Williams was talking about in his talk about metrics. And metrics, just for metrics' sake, like they have to tell a story. They don't exist but to support a story. And the story, like, you have to be able to communicate the why along with these metrics, along with the story, to really make those metrics valuable when you're looking at reporting them to leadership or whoever, whether it's to a board, like in Alyssa's case, or whether it's to internal management or somebody who's going to have to make tactical decisions. Like there's always got to be an understanding of the story and the why that these things are telling. I thought that was really really interesting.
Yeah, and in my other metrics video that you can actually go watch on the YouTube channel as well, I kind of express that as metrics really need to line up to key activities and your risk factors, but ultimately you've enumerated those things anyway because you have a goal in mind. And those metrics are supposed to tell you whether you're getting closer to the goal or not. Tactical metrics of like, how many attacks did we block? That doesn't tell you whether you got closer to your goal or not necessarily.
Yeah.
And so, how do you get metrics to the board that actually say, here's how we are doing against our goals that we said we were going to do and accomplish? I think that's what they really care about.
Yep. And there's, some education that has to happen as well, so that, they can sort of understand what you're telling them, understand what questions to ask as well, because it's difficult when you go into a situation with non-technical folks, non-security folks, and you get questions that aren't the right question because they're not sure exactly what to ask. And like one of the ones that I've hated the most, and I've been asked by a well-meaning CEO and board president of a company, how secure are we?
Right.
And like it's a question that you can't really quantify. Like it's not really the right question to be asking.
Right.
But without a bunch of education to help him understand what really is the question he wants to be asking, it's difficult to do that. So you have to be ready to do a little bit of education there. And one of the things Jake talked about in that situation, again, was to use frameworks. And we talked about frameworks a few different times, sort of those standards that are there that have been developed by industry experts and governing bodies and those types of things. But by using those frameworks, the one he used as a example in this was a framework that was developed by Google, and I'm blanking on the specific name because I didn't write down the specific name, for usability, for UX, user experience. And that user experience, like how usable is our system, is sort of akin to how secure are we? Well, how usable is our system? If we use this framework, we can now start to quantify different pieces of usability in sort of different areas. The same way in our security frameworks, we can quantify things in different domains or different functions, families of controls, types of things like that. and then start talking about maturity
Right.
in each of those areas. So how secure are we? Well, we're totally secure. Like obviously there's no such thing. That's not
Right.
a finite state.
It's not like immunization or something like that.
Yeah, at that
it's like
point.
it's impossible to get infected.
Yep. So I liked the concept of using the framework there and borrowing from UX to talk about that. There's a book I like called Borrowing Brilliance that talks about borrowing concepts and ideas from other fields to find creative solutions to problems in your own. And this is an interesting way of borrowing the way that UX designers can communicate, the usability of a product,
Right.
or something like that, in a way that I guess makes sense to them. So, we can kind of use frameworks in security to do the same thing. And then, the metrics, like Alyssa was talking about, like doing your recon, knowing what the board or what your audience is looking for. It was to make the metrics be relevant to them.
Right.
Like, what is it that they care about? What is it that they want to know? Like, that's what you really want to have with your metrics for those leaders. And another piece that I enjoyed was the vanity metrics. It was the term that he used. The metrics that make you look good, but they don't really say much of anything. And these they come in the form of the examples he gave were the raw counts of things. We blocked this many attacks, this many tens of thousands of
insert vendor report here.
Yeah, port
reports.
scans, whatever. Exactly. It's exactly like the out-of-the-box dashboards that you get in a lot of these tools that, the vendor's all proud of, but then you look at it, you watch it in the demo, and you're just thinking, this is useless data to me. It's not something that's usable, actionable. It doesn't tell a story on here. It's tactical.
Right. It's great to pivot around with.
Yeah, but it's not something that leadership would necessarily be interested in. But he went as far as to call vanity metrics dangerous. And I hadn't thought of that before. I thought that was really astute because, and the way he explained it is, if you have somebody in your audience that actually knows their stuff, and you're trying to use these vanity metrics to make yourself look good, but they don't really mean anything.
Right.
They're not really saying anything. They're not telling a story, and they find that, and they want to start picking at that. Your credibility is going to be shot in front of the rest of the board or the leader, whoever you're presenting to. So you have to be really careful with those metrics, and you've got to make sure you're focusing on metrics that are showing the right things that they're interested in, and at the level that they're interested in, that are more strategic and less tactical. Showing trends is kind of an important thing, but looking at strategy and your achievement of strategy, your performance against expected progress on goals, or meeting service level objectives and things like that. Those are the types of things you want to try and bubble up, and not raw counts of things. Like those are too far in the weeds to give to leadership.
Absolutely. Yeah, and it really goes back, you're aligning to those goals that you're trying to get them, that you got them to buy into and invest in some of these efforts, right? And then, it's those key activities, right? Of, IT and infrastructure and these people, they're performing well in their activities, which is resulting in less incidents, or it's resulting in less. You may have a couple of those little bits of metrics that are kind of like indicators that, yes, things seem to be working here. Yep. And this is helping us then achieve our goal better. And that's why you're seeing those numbers move. And I think I think that could be powerful, but it all has to go back to that story of, are we getting closer to those goals or not? Performance, and not just yours, but other people's performance on those key activities.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, overall, it was a fantastic conference. Like I said, the talks were great. I mean, obviously, this isn't all of the talks.
Oh,
and
gosh, no.
We can't obviously
We had a
rehash.
primer that went for like an hour and a half.
We obviously can't rehash everybody's talk here. I feel bad that like everybody who spoke, and gave amazing talks was, not called out here. These were just the ones that I happened to see that resonated with me and what I'm thinking about.
Did you get a chance to volunteer in the Career Village or was it the Career Village?
I did not.
You
this
did
year.
not.
I
Okay.
did not this
But
year.
you've done that in the past, didn't you?
I did for PancakeSCon.
That's right.
I helped out with
Same
with
framework.
PancakeSCon. Yep.
Same framework. Got you. Yeah, I thought that was a really cool thing. They were actually very open about some of their metrics too, which was like, I think they said now they've helped 200 people get their job in information security or promotion or something like that. And they even had people that came back this year today tell them, I received promotion or I received a new job just because, of what you did last year.
I actually had somebody reach out to me recently from the resume review that I did at PancakeSCon in January or February, and just kind of follow up out of the blue and say, hey, by the way, thanks again for your help. Like I was able to, get a new job and move it into a management role. Like they actually achieve the goal that they were trying to achieve.
Right.
When we were doing the resume reviews. So, the Career Village that Leslie runs is just incredibly powerful for people to advance to their goals in their career.
And I was excited to hear that they've made that framework open. Like it's
in
on
GitHub.
GitHub. And so if you want to run your own resume village or career village, Miss Bats and Hacks for Pancakes has actually uploaded that to their to Miss Bats GitHub, which I'll put down in the doobly-doo. And essentially you can go and run it for your own conference, or if you have, it doesn't even have to be a HackerCon. It can be any. You could basically just run this as your own little micro event in your own community. Basically, it's like, hey, come, you've got 10 or so other volunteer, hiring managers or so who want to do mock interviews or whatever. Go and bring that to your city, even if it's just that little event. Maybe there's a career fair, a tech career fair that's going on, and maybe you want to say, hey, we'll provide this opportunity for this. So there's a lot of things that you could end up using that for, and I think we ought to see that in other places.
Yeah, that'll be it'd be great if people can start taking that, and their comment is basically like, we can only take this so far, just
right.
The two of us.
Just
Please.
Two of them.
Yeah,
they have a lot of volunteers,
please,
but it's just two of them.
Take the framework, use it, implement it in your communities, and those types of things. So,
did you get around to any of the sponsors? There were some pretty interesting sponsors this year I'd never heard of. I felt like, shouldn't you be like an RSA or Black Hat at their startup con or something like that?
Yeah, we did. I had great conversations with the sponsors. It was a pretty small group of sponsors this year. So the quality of the sponsors and exhibitors was very good. There were a few that I wasn't familiar with.
Right.
And so I was able to chat with them. I actually ducked out of some of the conference talks so that I could go talk to them in the exhibitor hall when it was quieter, so I could really dive in with them.
Yeah, they weren't just pitching and then moving you along.
Yeah,
to get to the next person to pitch and move along.
Yeah, one of the ones that really impressed me with Tines. I had never seen them before, never heard of them before, but in talking with them, their platform was built for security automation. It's supposed to be very flexible. You can kind of integrate with lots of different things, both on the input side and the output side. And their platform lets you do sort of a no-code, or low-code, whatever, like logic, build workflows in the system and apply logic and that kind of stuff. To do things, automate things, based on triggers and what have you, and the system can take inputs and reach out and pull data from APIs and parse things and manipulate the data and then do other actions. But while they were talking to me, like I was almost distracted because my mind was racing, thinking of all the things that I could build with this. Part of me was saying, man, I could build some cool stuff with my kids.
Right.
With this. forget Scratch. Let's build
Yes.
build something with this tool to start teaching them programming logic without getting into syntax,
Right.
but that actually does something that they would find like truly valuable, something that they would want to do instead of just a toy, exploring to see what they can do. Like make it go get some information, do something. So I thought that was really cool, but I felt like from an operational standpoint, my background, DevOps, IT ops, IT support, prior to pivoting to security, a lot of times I flip to the business operating is really, like security doesn't matter outside of the business. So the business operating is the important part. So I think of operationally, like what can you do with this tool? And in an organization that is, small, doesn't have an internal dev team, maybe has an IT manager, somebody, maybe a help desk person or something like that.
They don't have vast
a dev
coding
shop.
experience.
They don't have a dev shop. This would allow them to actually do some pretty advanced stuff with business, kind of create some custom business applications, some business logic to interconnect between systems and automate some things without being, DevOps experts and that sort of thing. So that was all really, really cool.
Or if you're like me and I know enough about language, computer languages, that if I saw a kind of like example code, I can understand it and then I can manipulate it. But writing from scratch, I'm not good at that. Yeah. I'm thinking low code would actually be a really great way to kind of be like, okay, I want to build something that does this, and now you've got something that's at least there kind of as a prototype almost, and then you start going, all right, now I can modify it from here on my own, or maybe go back to low code and be like, I need a snippet that does this, and now you just plug and play that functionality into the code. Like that's the level I could do and feel more comfortable with, rather than learning deeply into a particular programming language. Which I think could almost have its own pitfalls, but I think anything that gets people more into getting more comfortable with coding and getting into that, I think that's super valuable. Yeah.
And then another one that happened to be sitting right next to them in the hall was Lima Charlie.
Yeah.
And I liked their platform as well. I actually had met the guys that I talked to in the hall, had a good conversation, but then the next morning, I met their founder downstairs, and we had coffee together.
Oh, nice!
And talked more about the product. And I think what was interesting with that is I was trying to wrap my head around exactly what they do, because they're not exactly like a SIEM. They're not like a Splunk or something where you're gonna log aggregation and run a bunch of queries and that kind of stuff against. But they take, log data in, or data from multiple sources. If you think of kind of like a stream of data coming in, and they can have rules that watch that data and can process that in some way and trigger actions based on those rules. And those rules don't necessarily have to be anomalous activity. They could be anything in that data stream that you want to pull out and do something with, or have an action happen from. Now, there's the system has like an EDR client that can be a source of data and do some automation there. But with those rules, you could have automation that goes out to other places or back to the EDR client, pulls in more data to enrich things with a detection. But if you're running application logs or something else that's not specifically security into it, you can also kick off different automation with different types of events and stuff there. They don't have a query language yet for it. So it's all the rules are defined by YAML at this point. But as you, in looking at this, and as I was talking with their founder, like I said, it's almost in a way sounds like a bus that you have this stream of data coming in, and sort of a way to almost implement sort of an event-driven architecture like you would have in an application development. where things happen and it triggers, but those triggers could kick off over to the Tines platform through webhooks or other things.
Gotcha.
And now you can start doing much more advanced logic in the Tines platform with the data that comes over and parse and manipulate
That's
it even more,
interesting.
and then trigger other outbound things. So between these two, you can start building some pretty advanced, not just security detection automation, but business
Funny that they're sitting next to each other.
event, right?
I wonder if they know what each other has and like the value of partnering with
and
each other.
they do partner together.
Oh,
Because
good.
I asked them about that, and they do partner together quite regularly. But as a consultant now, helping my clients pick the right tools, as I go around to these, I'm not looking with the hat, wearing my buyer hat anymore as a CISO. I'm wearing my consultant hat, and the conversations I'm having with them is more around business development, if that makes
Right.
sense.
Yeah.
And so as I was having these conversations with them, like I'm thinking like, okay, we can build some really neat stuff with this, where work with maybe IT MSPs or something like that, or
Yeah.
or their internal folks. But it's one of these things where what you build on it takes the value that they built, and you're standing on the shoulders of giants almost.
Yes.
At that point, you're continuing to build on top of it, and you can build almost your own intellectual property
Right.
on top of these things to be very custom. And so another client comes along and says, wow, that's their tech stack. We're just going to copy this and we're just going to deploy those tools. But like, if you don't deploy the tool and you don't implement
Right.
them and the stuff in the same way,
so now
like
you've got
it's
a
so
secret sauce.
custom, like you've almost got a secret sauce there. So the flexibility that these tools offer, especially when you start pairing them together, like I was just blown away. And
Yeah.
they're not paying me to say this or anything. Like I don't know. I'm legitimately looking forward to talking to them more in the coming weeks and
Yeah.
actually getting some tech demos
Right.
of these, and then playing with the free version, because they have free
they have free
versions. Both
versions.
of them have free versions.
I love that when they do
so, and they're not crippled.
Right.
They're limited in
Seat count or
like the number of like workflows in times
Right.
for.
Yeah,
I think
yeah,
you can
yeah.
have up to 3
yeah.
in that, but
But
like
fully featured.
Three should be enough, but it's fully featured
Yeah.
in those 3, for example. So like I'm looking forward to getting the demo and then playing around with this.
So they won the BlueTeamCon Accidental CISO Award.
Yeah.
If there is such a thing. Evening festivities.
Yep.
You go to any of those? I actually participated. I ended up doing some piano bar con stuff. So Gary ended up playing piano, and he had a list of songs that he knew. And if you knew how to sing one of the songs, then you could join in and sing. So there was one that let's see. I did "Moving Out" by Billy Joel.
Okay.
Which that was kind of interesting. I think he keyed it just a little too high, but Billy Joel back in the day sang pretty high too. He did Benny and the Jets, which Elton John in his early work, that's even higher. So that didn't go so well for me. But then I did If I Were a Rich Man from Fiddler on the Roof. And that was really funny. Because I channeled a little bit of Zero Mostel and his eccentricness in the role.
I hear our resident crooner Shecky
Oh, yes.
came up and blew everybody away. I wasn't
Came up on
there
My
for that.
Way from Frank Sinatra, right? Just right at the end and did the last refrain and did it my way. And we're just like, oh my gosh, the golden voice has arrived.
Yep. It is. He's amazing. I've heard him sing. I think at Circle City Con.
Maybe
in the
even so,
past,
yeah,
possibly.
karaoke. Yeah, I think at Hacker Karaoke he's done that before, yeah.
Yep. And I wasn't up there when he was doing that. I was downstairs in the game show.
Right.
And I'm blanking on the name of
Blockbusters,
the game.
I think they did, yeah.
Wasn't one that I was familiar with, but Lintile was, killing it again down there. I mean, it was just an amazing time. Everybody had a good time down there, and he does such an awesome job of like engaging everybody and keeping the game moving.
Yeah.
And making sure everybody's having a good time.
Yeah, it's that improvisation, because I know I've talked with him before. I'm like, how did you do that? And then he's basically like, I took a lot of improv classes. Like, if you want to get better about being able to have like an answer, have something to keep something moving forward, do improv and take improv classes. You kind of get rid of those inhibitions to kind of think before you speak, which can be helpful in some situations, maybe even talking with the business.
Yep.
But sometimes you actually do want to think before you talk, speak. But off the cuff isn't always good. But in the way he does it, it's always, for comedic value especially, and for entertainment. He's just got that where he can just keep going, regardless of what your answer is going to be. It could be not what he was wanting you to go towards. It doesn't matter. He's going to go down there with you and then come back around to where he wants to go. So he's well practiced in that.
Yep. And then downstairs, I know you were having a good time in the party when Carl was down there.
Did you catch me rage dancing?
I did.
Maybe that's what it was, by the way. It was rage dancing. I was just like, oh, this is good. I need to rage dance to this. So I was just like very like.
It was.
I ended up messing up my knee too. It was kind of fun.
It was a good time. It was a good time. What I enjoyed in the party, and you had mentioned, or like it wasn't so loud that you couldn't have conversations in there. And at the table that I sat, I was also really struck that the conversations weren't all about security at that point. Like people were talking about hobbies and other things.
The whole weekend.
Yeah, we kind of moved on at that point, and at our table we were talking about the guy says race cars and that kind of stuff. Like we were talking about all sorts of different stuff, and it was a lot of fun. And I ended up crashing early and getting up early this morning then and going for a walk and that kind of stuff. But the party was a really good time for everybody to kind of mix and mingle and get some time to talk. The social aspect of these cons is huge. I really cherish being able to come to these and meet folks that either I haven't seen in a couple of years or, whatever, since the last con, but prior to COVID and all that kind of stuff. But also people that I haven't met before, like through Twitter, like people that I know through Twitter and like consider good friends, but haven't actually met in person to be able to do that.
We gained a lot of those during the pandemic.
Yeah, and that's it. I met up with Pivot, somebody who's I've talked to. Via Twitter stuff, but haven't actually met in person.
I've not met that person either, I don't think.
Yeah, and we were able to, spend some time going and just, take actually a pretty decent walk around the area and kind of explore this little part of Chicago or whatever last night for a while and just talk about all sorts of stuff and life and finally get to connect. And then once everything finished up tonight, being able to go to dinner with some friends and just reconnect and have good conversations and that kind of stuff. And
that's why I like cons, especially like this size too. Yeah. You don't feel like you're lost, but you always feel like there's someone new to meet too. And I met so many new people, and that was super interesting to have that kind of effect. And I love having conferences that I go to where I joke and say there's talks at that con because usually I'm off talking with people and sitting down. Luckily this weekend I got to go to 5 talks, but a well executed con.
Yeah, very well.
If there were problems, we didn't know about them.
Right, and they did a really nice job. Like I liked the transparency and how they ran the CFP, to pick speakers and that kind of stuff.
Right.
I like the transparency in just kind of the stats that they gave us at the end of the conference of how things ran. It's very obvious that you've got some GRC folks running this conference
who like metrics,
who have set their strategy, set their policies, and making sure that they're complying with them, and that helped them run a very successful, well-oiled machine for this conference.
Yeah, if there were problems, we didn't notice them. And I can tell you from running a conference for 9 years, there were problems that we didn't notice for sure.
I'm sure there were.
There had to have been. And actually I got to see a little behind the scenes as I was helping them pack up that, oh yeah, there were some lessons to learn that I was able to give them during that. And I was just like, maybe you should think about this. And they're like, oh, that's awesome. I'm like, it took us 3 years to get that one. So I was like, it's about time you learned that one a year ahead of us. So good. So it was really good. I'm looking forward to next year. They're going to extend it a day. They're bringing trainings and villages. So I think that was kind of the big thing that Frank and I were always talking about. One of the board members at BlueTeamCon, I said, I urged him, I said, make sure when you're building this, keep it simple, do a few things well, and everyone will love it because that's what they expected. They expected those few things. Do way too much, you'll fail at some of them, and then people remember the failures, right?
Yep.
And so now they're ready to go to that next level and bring in some more villages and bring in trainings and who knows what else they'll bring in next year. But those are just the ones I think they were sharing with us. So
yeah,
looking forward to next year.
Very excited for next year as well.
But yeah, so I mean, I've had 2 classes of OJ during this. But any other thoughts or things before we head off?
No, this has been a long week and been a good time. But I suppose my only thing, and I've said this before, closing out other podcast appearances, folks just make sure they take care of themselves and that sort of thing, because nobody else, is going to take care of you for you sometimes with mental health and stuff. I did 2 conferences back to back this week.
That's right, you did.
This has been a very long week, and as much fun as this is, I got to still be careful that I'm taking care of myself and, knowing my limits and that sort of thing. So, take care of yourself is the biggest thing I just want to close with when folks come to these conferences and that kind of stuff. And just, know your limits, make sure you're eating and drinking and drinking water, staying hydrated.
We've got water even here.
Other stuff.
Got my OJ. But yeah, so, what do you think about some of the stuff we've been talking about today? We've covered a lot of metrics, and things. Did any of this help any of you? Sure. I mean, it's helped us. I think I'm going to use some of the stuff we learned when I get back to work tomorrow. So yeah, what do you think? Do you disagree? Do you agree? We love disagreements. I like hearing disagreements, but I also like hearing agreements too. Start a discussion down in the comments. Catch us on LinkedIn, definitely on Twitter, AccidentalCISO on Twitter. Odd job. So yeah, other than that, I think we'll catch you in the next video.
Yep. Cheers, everybody.